Thank you for being here today for Coffee with Composers. This series is intended to inspire you to learn more about the lives behind the music that you play every day as a fellow piano enthusiast or a music educator, as well as learning from real-life composers. So today's guest is Christopher Norton, and Christopher is a composer, producer, arranger, and educator, also publishing music with 80 Days Publishing. And I am beyond honored and, to be honest, a wee bit starstruck to have Christopher Norton here today. And I've loved learning his music over the years alongside students, and there's just such a rich variety in his music of tonal colors, wildly wonderful rhythms in his collection. So I hope you'll get to know more about Christopher today and more about his music. So be sure to say hello in the comments. Let me know where you're listening in from, and ask questions as you go, because we'll be sure to circle back and answer them as we can. So to help listeners get to know you better, Christopher, how would you describe yourself as youthful Christopher learning and practicing the piano? How did you get your start in music?
Well, I was, like many people are actually, I was from a non-musical background without a piano. So it became evident quite early on that I was very interested in music, particularly in classical music. It's a rather funny thing to say, but even as a very small child, I was gravitating towards things playing on the radio of a classical nature, you might say. And I don't remember how this came about, but my parents were churchgoers, and I think there was a piano there. Because by the time my mother decided I better have lessons at the age of 8, I could already play, and I hadn't really had any lessons. I just figured out how to play the piano by myself. One of the nice things about this was my mother went along to the local convent. She didn't really know anything about piano teachers, and that was recommended to her that nuns taught music. When she spoke to the nun at this convent, they said, well, actually, we're full. And she said, would you just hear him play? Obviously, I played something, and the nun said, I'll find a time. You don't get many of these in a lifetime, you know.
Yes.
So obviously, I was kind of, as I've always been as a composer, kind of self-taught initially, and then went through conventional instruction, learned how to read music, and did examinations and so on. But my start was definitely kind of under my own steam.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's kind of neat. Did you have a piano at home then that you were just exploring sound?
No, I didn't.
No, wow.
No, they bought it. Well, when I say bought, in those days they rented a piano from a local piano shop with a view to buying it when I was 8. Again, in other words, at the same time as my mother decided I'd better have lessons, they also got a piano. So I was very lucky. And I combined the piano with listening to a lot of music. And in fact, one of the interesting things about my case is my father was quite sort of interested in technical things. He had a tape recorder, and I ended up with that tape recorder, reel-to-reel tape recorder. And we had a concert program in New Zealand, where I was from. And I used to record things off the concert program that I particularly liked. And gradually became clear to me that there were certain composers that I was really drawn to and wanted to play music by those composers. But because I had no sort of conventional background in terms of my parents, I was, again, self-taught in terms of what I liked. And so I realized quite early on I was very drawn to the music of Prokofiev, of Poulenc, of Szymanowski, of Martinu. I liked all the classical composers, but in fact I was drawn to all sorts of things which weren't kind of conventional repertoire as well. And I read books of analysis, and in fact by the age of 12, I'd actually sent away for the miniature scores of all Nielsen symphonies from their publishers in Denmark. So I was a great fan of Carl Nielsen as well. So I was always going to be sort of slightly unusual case, I think, when it came to trying to actually write music, because I just delved into all sorts of areas by myself.
Yeah, you had such a broad, and like you say, because it wasn't somebody else choosing a path for you, you got to just follow paths that you enjoyed, it sounds like.
And funny enough, early on, it didn't include popular music. I mean, I liked popular music, but it wasn't really on my radar. I liked classical music, and that's why I immersed myself in it. It was only when I was late teenager that I started to become aware of pop music, largely because a friend of mine was a great expert on it and became one of New Zealand's premier rock critics. And he said to me,
neat.
you just haven't listened to the right stuff. And then I became a school teacher quite young. And of
Right.
course, at that point, I realized that knowledge of pop music was essential to survive because students had no interest in classical music at all.
Yeah.
And so I actually started to play pop music and rock for the first time, probably at the age of 17 or 18, really late.
Yeah.
And that in itself has been an interesting factor as well, because in fact, when I started to write things down which sounded like popular music, I wrote them down in great detail, not realizing that anybody did anything any different. And so
Yeah.
microjazz, which came out in 1983, I'd actually been writing pieces in that kind of vein for probably 5 or 6 years before that. And they were very clearly and comprehensively notated, but they sounded right. And I think that's the magic formula. The pieces sound right, but they are actually fingered, articulated, pedaled, or in great detail.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I still see a lot of educational music which has very little dynamics or articulation on it. And I think, people presumably do articulate and phrase things. It's not the era of Bach. You don't need to have no
Yes.
no articulation written on your music, if you like. That's partly explains my kind of unusual crossing of different genres, if you like, in my music, because
Yeah.
I was exploring a very wide range of music through listening and study, you might say, but it then embraced popular music as well, and so I just gradually pulled that into the equation as well, and the two became a confluence, which I think created the microjazz series and the connection series as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I think I love that it's just your own path that you found and from very young, and like you say you loved classical music, and I do see it in students now. Like I think we assume they want a certain thing, but as soon as their world is opened up and they're actually just looking at like what sounds do my ears love, it's interesting to see what they are drawn to. So I
Totally,
love
you can't presume that students won't like Brahms or
Mhm.
won't like Schumann or whatever. And certainly, a lot of students play pop music very poorly.
Yes,
It's not necessarily a passport to things working on the piano. In fact, if anything, it's a rather difficult route to try
it
and play
is.
popular music on the piano successfully, because the combination of the syncopation and the voicings can end up sounding
Mhm.
very clunky indeed. Whereas a lot of classical music is specifically written for the piano. So I'm just
Yeah.
saying, I found a way through that, as you probably have gathered, through,
Yeah.
for instance, using a lot of rootless voicings. In other words, a lot of the music I
Mhm.
read even early on didn't have root position chords at the bottom. I was kind of immediately feeling that you shouldn't have something which is too rooted, if you like,
Yes, yeah.
in root position chords. And poorly written popular music on the educational sphere often
Mhm.
has effectively Victorian harmonies,
Yes, yeah.
above with popular style phrases above. What my interest was trying to find things which are closer to what a keyboard player would play if they've got a bass player with them or a guitar player with them, and you don't play the whole chord.
Right. Yeah, you're actually having some independence. And that does show really clearly in your music. As I was listening through your YouTube channel, which we'll talk about a bit later to our audience here today, I noticed too so much refinement. It's really clear to me that you had that classical background, but also that you were finding your own route because there is so much refinement in what you're playing and how your pieces are constructed. So I was really fascinated by that. How did you approach practice? It sounds like you just were playing. You must have been playing a lot to come to the nuns in the convent being already a piano player. So how
I
were you finding the time on that?
Well, I didn't really, I don't really have any memory of how I might have approached practicing the
Hmm.
piano or whatever at an early stage, but I ended up a bit later
Yeah.
with a very, very good teacher, and he basically was extremely rigorous. And in fact,
Yeah.
I won the New Zealand most well-known concerto competition
Hmm.
when I was about 19, I think, and it was
Yeah.
the Prokofiev First Concerto. And I was working
Wow.
on it with him. I've never forgotten this. And I stumbled over some incredibly difficult passage, and he said, "Shut the book."
Oh
And,
wow. Yeah.
and then he said, "Can you name me the notes of that left-hand passage from memory?" And I did. And then he said, "That's fine. Now, can you name me
Interesting.
the fingerings from memory?"
Ah,
and I couldn't. And he said, "Why do you come so badly prepared to lessons?"
interesting.
So when I finally did that passage with symphony orchestra, I couldn't go wrong because I was so clear where every finger was going. So
Yeah.
he was a great believer in the idea of doing thorough preparation, particularly
Mhm.
for very difficult pieces, so that you know exactly where you're going, particularly in terms of where your fingering is.
Yeah.
And I found that still very interesting when I'm writing stuff down of my own, that I do try and put all the signpost fingering in, if you like, so that you know if
Yes.
there's a change of position, here's a sign that you're going to change that position, change your finger. It's the same with phrasing. I think I did Mozart concertos with this teacher as well. He was a student of at the Academy in London, and ended up sort of a pupil of Claudio Arrau. I mean, he was very sort of classical provenance, if you like.
Yeah.
But he was also a very fine jazz player, and I owe a lot to him because I'm like most people, I'm quite idle really, and I think if I
Oh,
hadn't had someone that strict, I
yeah.
wouldn't have got as good. You know, I've never been as good
Yeah.
since
Oh,
because I really need a fairly fierce teacher on my back. You know, it's a funny thing to
yeah.
say, isn't it? I think some students are like that they need someone who's rigorous, and that's what I had.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially that at the right time, like as a student, that early on when you were just exploring might not have been the right fit, but then at that stage where you're developing and you're able to take on that sort of intensity, it can be such a perfect fit. So it's such a
Well, it's
balance,
true.
isn't
I
it?
was actually a full-time high school music teacher at the time I was having lessons with him, so I used to have lessons at 6 in
Wow.
the morning.
Ah,
So I
yeah.
had a full-time job at the same time. But I realized at that stage I didn't really want to be a concert pianist. I mean, I read
Yeah.
about concert pianists. I mean, my favorite still is Barenboim, who apparently had all the Beethoven sonatas memorized by the time he was 8.
Oh, wow.
And then he did that complete Beethoven sonata cycle at the Festival Hall in London about 3 or 4 years ago, and when he was 70, still from memory.
Wow. Wow.
That's what you're up against. Or
Yes.
Rubinstein, that's another great story as well. He did a test piece for a competition about 1904 by Casella, and he
Yeah.
learned it on the train on the way to the competition, and then played it from memory. You
Oh,
see, he never
mercy.
actually. So what I'm saying is, there are people who are at the top of the tree usually have extraordinary talents of that kind as well, like
Yeah.
photographic memories or whatever. Because
Yes.
I mean, you can't really do it otherwise. It's just such a difficult field I never had the intentions of being a concert pianist. I just liked playing the piano, and I still do, which is quite nice.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, yes, that is something that can carry you through a long career of music making, right? When it comes
Yeah,
back to the fact that you still love to get to the piano and explore, and I think that
yeah.
can carry you through. There's so much to unpack there, and I just want to address our audience here. So if you're listening in today, feel free to say hello in the comments, and I truly hope today's chat will bring inspiration to your own music journey as you hear that practice process and Christopher's adventures in music too. So I'd love to hear if you've played Christopher Norton's music yet, or if learning about his music is new to you. And just as we're thinking about that practice that you were just mentioning, Christopher, I thought you kind of speak to the fact that there's always someone who can do something better. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase it, but when you
Oh,
were thinking
no,
of concert
definitely.
pianists,
I'm
yeah.
thinking of concert pianist, but also I had a very formative thing happen to me when I was about 16 years old. There was a young man came around New Zealand. His father was a New Zealander originally,
Yeah.
and he played the entire classical repertoire by ear.
Wow.
I mean, everything. Anything he heard, he could play on the piano. All the Chopin
Wow.
etudes, all the Tchaikovsky piano concertos, including the fourth, all the
Yeah. Oh,
Rachmaninoff concertos, the Debussy cello sonata, the Martineau symphonies. He could play anything.
oh.
And I realized there are extraordinary talents out there. And in fact, one of the things I've never forgotten, in 1970 this was, he gave a piano recital, this guy, he was probably
Hmm.
20 at the time, and it was a Scriabin sonata, a Metna sonata, and a Rachmaninoff sonata. But get this, he in fact improvised three sonatas in the style of those composers. So did
Oh,
it.
wow.
So again, I thought I like music, and I think I can make a living in it, but I'm not the most talented person I've come across. It's quite a useful thing to find out early on and think, let's just concentrate on what I can do and not worry about what I can't do.
Yeah,
um,
yeah, that's an important thing.
and I think that's an interesting point, because I think there's
Mhm.
quite a few students who see extraordinarily gifted and hardworking young students at competitions or whatever,
Mhm.
8-year-olds playing Mozart concertos or whatever it might be, and they think, I
Yes.
could never do that. Well, the truth of the matter is they probably couldn't. But that
Mhm.
doesn't mean they can't even make a career in music, or enjoy playing all their lives. You
Yeah.
just don't want to be hung up on what you can't do. What you want to do is concentrate on what you can do.
Yeah, I think that's an important message because to some, we could look at you and think, oh my goodness, you were playing, with the symphony early on. I believe I saw, 14 to 16, like very big works. And you have this amazing long time career. But it's so interesting to hear from you too, that sense of humility. Like there's always going to be people doing things that you can't do at any stage of musical
Yeah,
development.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got two words for you: Marta Argerich. Or whoever,
Yeah,
Marc-Andre Hamelin, who I saw in concert a couple of years ago here in Stratford,
right.
and I thought, wow, I just have to love it, and not spend any time worrying about the fact that I couldn't do it. And it's certainly,
Yeah.
I'm not going to go through all the hours and hours in order to try and get anywhere near it. I figure I've just got to, enjoy my life, spend the time doing things which I think are contributing to the sum of human happiness.
Yes. Oh, I love that so much. And I think you've really spoken to the heart that a lot of people in the arts, it's something that you can spend a lifetime like what you're saying. And even, my experience has been so limited comparatively, but you can spend years and years doing music and still feel like you're not there. And it can
Exactly.
really rob a lot of joy, like you're saying, if you're constantly comparing and thinking, oh man, an 8-year-old can play this and this person can memorize better. I know for me, memory wasn't easy at all. I too have just started realizing when I started this channel, even that, you know what? Music is meant to be made and enjoyed. And I, like you, really love it. And so I
Yeah.
don't want to hold back because of that fear of comparison, which there's a famous quote that says, comparison is the thief of joy.
I think
And
that's a very good point. And in fact, the other thing which has been very interesting, you may or may not know, but I was married for 41 years to a very musical person who was a lovely woman, and she died in 2013.
mm,
And I married again to a
yes.
Canadian. That's why I'm in Canada. And she's a
Right.
composer, but she'd never really had anybody aware of that she was a composer before.
Mhm.
And what she was particularly interested in was the fact that I appeared to be completely non-competitive. In other words, I was perfectly
Yes.
happy to push her music and talk about what she was doing and help her to get some stuff out. Um,
Yeah.
and she found that very interesting. And I think it's because I spent those formative years thinking I'm just one of the factors here, if you like. I'm not the
Mhm.
top. I'm not the bottom.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
regard. I think everybody has potentially deserves a place in the sun. I'm very
Yeah.
struck by this because I'm teaching a lot of composition informally online,
Right.
and what I've discovered is that nearly all students and adults indeed who write usually have a good idea when they start a piece.
Interesting.
Nearly
Yeah.
everybody's first idea is good, and
Hmm.
it's all down to what you do with it.
Yeah.
It's not that you can't come up with an idea. It's the fact that you don't believe it in it enough to kind of work it. And you've
Mm.
discovered I'm a very rigorous composer, so I do come up with an idea and then try and make the piece feel like it all flows from that initial idea. Do you agree?
Yes, I do. I've seen that so much in your compositions that they're just really well developed. And I appreciated that even from the earliest ones that I'm seeing in the new RCM series and working my way through there and thinking, wow, these are just packed with refinement, and
Well,
creativity.
I'm hoping packed with logic as well in a way.
Yes.
Because one of my favorite, I was thinking about this the other day. One of my favorite composers still is Brahms, and one of
Yes.
the reasons I like Brahms is he comes up with a good idea, then he works it. In other words,
Yeah.
there's a paragraph which follows the first one, which feels like it's a logical extension of that. A new
Mhm.
idea comes in at the right time, and then he uses those two ideas. he's economical, if you like, with his material, at the same
Yeah.
time being quite rhapsodic. So
Yeah.
I like that, and I've realised a lot of sort of amateur composers, they come up with too many ideas. They come up with an idea
Right.
and then they forget that and go on to another one, and then another one, and you think, well, what was wrong with the first idea? You know, can't we hear that again, or can't you work on
Yeah.
it?
Exactly. And I love that the fact of the human brain even is that there's comfort in repetition.
Yeah,
So we are drawn to things that we go, "Oh, that's familiar, but now it's changed." And I think there's a lot of beauty in that when you're creating and like you say, working that one idea and drawing it out in such beautiful ways that
yeah.
brings your listener into the story, I think.
That's right, and
Yeah.
certainly if people ask me what my formula is as a writer, I say, when I start with something and then try and do something which seems to logically come out of that, of what I've come up with in the first place.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's
anything is fine as a starting point. One note, a rhythm, a drum sequence, or whatever it might be. Anything will be enough to get me started.
Yeah, I love that. And I was actually thinking of that when I was thinking of questions because I love that your own music journey was this colorful. It spanned many different genres. And I was looking at classical, rock, pop, Latin, jazz, and gospel. I had no idea you also had gospel pieces in there, which is beautiful. But your versatility shows in this wide array variety of compositions you create. And in this series, I love how we're discovering how varied that creative process is for each individual composer. So
Yeah.
I did have that question of, do you start creating music with certain parameters in mind, or does a melody or rhythm just find its way into your fingers and
Yeah,
then you
just
work
finds
it
it.
out from
I
there?
work at the piano, so it does find its way into my fingers. It's a mysterious process. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I don't know why I can think of things, but I do.
Oh.
The other thing which I mentioned to you was
Hmm.
that I've done quite a lot of books, which I really am very pleased with, which are
Yeah.
using existing tunes.
Yes.
And my own kind of reinterpretations of pieces. And two of the books are preludes. The Eastern Preludes, the Pacific Preludes are using totally existing tunes from around the world, but they still
Right.
sound like me.
Yeah.
In other words, I take those notes, if you like, and then spin something which goes in directions I like. And I like
Yeah.
particular combinations of, piled up fifths is one thing I like. I like
Yeah.
open chords. It's rather hard to say, and I like things which have got a groove as well. I played in bands in the UK when I arrived there, which largely did things like James Brown.
Yeah.
In other words, it was all kind of R&B and soul, and
Yeah.
that's quite an influence on my writing as well. And I've been very lucky across my career as well that I trusted my intuition about who to collaborate with on the
Yeah.
backing tracks and MIDI files that I've got, because I've got so many tracks attached. And one particular composer who unfortunately died a couple of years ago, but he
Uh,
totally got what I was doing in terms of what was implied. And one of the best examples of that was Intercity Stomp, which is a very
oh,
popular piece
yes,
from microjazz.
it
And
is.
and I got the backing track done for that quite a few years after I wrote the piece. And when I got the backing track, I suddenly thought, doo 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 doo, doo 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 doo,
Do do.
doo 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 doo, doo 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 doo, just beat it.
Yeah.
It's Michael Jackson's "Beat It" is the kind of underlying beat,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
not that I'm copying it, but it's just
No.
that was the kind of springboard, if you like, for the rhythmic style, which I didn't
Yeah.
entirely realize until we tried to do backings to it.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I could totally. I've taught and enjoyed that piece many times. And I think what I'll do with this interview today, because I'm off camera a little bit, is that I'm going to play some of these pieces that you're mentioning in the video production and
Sure.
let our audience know what those sound like and some of your notes about that, because I'd love to point them in the direction too of seeing your resources. And I was going to mention to them that you've got this incredible YouTube channel, and I had been playing your music and playing alongside students for years with your music, but then I stumbled across your YouTube channel and I just stopped, full stop, because I thought, oh my goodness, it's such a rich variety of music that you've created, but also it really does show that you're a fine pianist. It's very refined and accurate. And I also loved so much pedagogy there for educators as well and learners.
Well, that's right, because in fact, even in the last little while, I've just finished doing notes on Microjazz Collection 3, which has been out for 40
Yeah.
years, but I've never had it on YouTube before. that's about to go up. And what
Yeah.
I've done, as you've noticed perhaps, is that in my
Yes.
recent videos, is I play the piece, but I've actually got teaching notes embedded in the video. So,
Yeah.
so at a certain point, it says you might like to make sure that the right hand doesn't overbalance the left hand at this point, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Common sense things, but it's quite nice to have a little bit of teaching material embedded into those videos and not just have a performance, I think.
Yeah, oh, it's been super valuable, and I just love that it just adds this richness to your channel there and super beneficial. So I'll definitely encourage our audience to subscribe and take advantage of that beautiful wealth of knowledge there. And again, the refinement is so interesting because, like you describe yourself as this young artist, is so much exploration and freedom, and yet your style is very refined and very, very highly detailed. So you've got this kind of very interesting combination there.
That's right. And one of my favorite quotes that I ever got from somebody was in Denver when I first toured America back in the late 80s. A guy came up to me after my presentation and said to me, I've got your first two books, which at the time was Micro Jazz 1 and More Micro Jazz 1, I think it was.
Yeah.
And he said to me, I played the first few pieces of the book and thought, this guy writes like I play. A great quote.
Yeah, yeah, it
And
is.
he was talking about voicings again, about the fact that
Mm,
he was a professional keyboard player, and
yeah.
he was playing it and thinking, well, this is kind of what I do if I'm playing with the band, you know,
Yeah.
both the phrasing and the arrangement of the left hand parts, and even the interplay between the hands was what he did when he played. So I've never forgotten that. It was such a nice kind of off the cuff compliment.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And I love, again, this importance of encouragement in the sphere of music making, because, like you've expressed, and I know the listeners today too, it's a hard journey at times, right? Like it's a lot of like solo work, and those kind encouragements that come along the way can impact you and really
Yeah.
give you that steam to continue on. So I love that.
Another thing which I should mention as well, which I thought was very interesting, the Connection series is a very large series, and it's
Yes.
over 200 pieces across 8 books, was what was originally written for the
Wow.
Royal Conservatory in Canada.
Yeah.
Um, but the brief was to write 8 grades of pieces across across, well, 20 to 30 pieces per book.
Right.
And when
Yeah.
I got the job, I realized that I'd need to start writing straight away in order to get the pieces to them edited, set, any
Wow.
comeback. I needed to start writing a piece a day
Oh,
for them.
wow.
And I did.
Yeah.
From the moment I got the commission, I sent them a piece every day. I wrote it and I set it and sent it to them and did a
Wow.
recording as well. But what was interesting to me was I was going through, in fact, my first wife was ill, so
Hmm.
I had a lot of things on my mind. But
Yeah.
I basically got up early and wrote this piece, and I didn't really think about what type of piece I was going to write or what level of piece I was going to write. I just wrote how I felt that morning.
Wow.
And I found that very interesting because, in fact, I wrote a hard piece one day and an easy piece the
Hmm.
next. And my editor, about 9 months in, said, "Actually,
Yeah.
you finished grade 7, but we still need some more for grade 3," sort of thing. I
Yeah.
wasn't trying to grade the pieces even. I just wrote what I felt, and I think
Yeah.
it really benefited from just saying, "What do I feel like writing today?" And I would say that to composers as well. That if you're trying to write, I'm thinking of piano here in particular, but
Hmm.
write how you, in a sense, write how you feel. In other words,
Yeah.
just start, and it doesn't have to be a hard piece or an easy piece. Just let your imagination be taken by whatever you
Hmm.
come up with on the day. Just thought it was interesting. And Microjazz, of course, the first 2 books were written virtually in 2 weeks, in
Wow.
one sitting,
Yeah.
because I had the commission to do this from a publisher, and
Oh,
all I had was a brief saying graded pieces in popular style. So I wrote a whole array of pieces, which included pieces which have
wow.
become absolute classics,
Yes.
like Dreaming, like Intercity
Yeah.
Stop, and so on. But
Yeah.
again, I just rode across the time period. I wrote them from one style to another without trying to connect them. I just thought,
Wow.
I feel like writing this now, forget that, and now I'm going to
Yeah.
write this.
Oh, interesting. And yet, I love what you say. Like you were, I want to address this too, because that's hard, some hard times in there for you. And it must almost feel, do you feel attached to some of the pieces as like a scrapbook of that journey through those hard days as well? Or
um,
was it just a relief, an escape,
it was a distraction. Yeah.
a distraction? Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, my first wife
Hmm.
had cancer for 10 years, but she
Wow.
worked until the last 6 months. So
Wow.
she really did very well, and so I can hardly say she was on her sick bed for all that time. Uh,
Yeah.
but it was nonetheless in the background. You think you know
Yeah.
how it's going to end, and
Yeah.
But I don't say that I express how I felt through any of the pieces particularly.
No.
If that's there, it's threaded into it without me realizing. I don't personally think of my work as autobiographical, particularly.
Yeah.
It's just because it comes from such a sort of subconscious part. You don't really know
Hmm.
why you put one note after the next, quite.
Yeah.
And in fact, funny enough, she had some treatment and said to me, "Why don't you play
Hmm.
me some of the pieces that you've been writing?" And I did. This is my first wife, and I played
Yeah.
them. And she said, "Well, you obviously weren't that worried because these are very cheerful."
Oh,
In
what
other
a
words,
memory.
there wasn't really a correlation in that sense. I wasn't
Yeah.
writing a whole lot
No.
of deeply introspective pieces. I was just
Yeah.
writing pieces,
Yeah,
and
and I
that's who I am.
yeah, and I love that you were able to just show up at the piano and like you say a daily practice of just
Yeah.
show up and not that you'd just be escaping all day, but just
No,
showing
no,
up
because
each
I
day
did
at
other
the
things the rest of
instrument.
the time. Yeah, because
Hmm.
I did a lot of record production. I sold over 1 million albums in the Christian market in Britain when I was
Yeah.
working there. So I've had a lot to do with that. In fact, one of the examples I sent you was from a series called The Hymn Makers, and I did a lot of
Yes.
arrangements of hymns. And that's another sort of funny thread which I've got in my repertoire because I'm a tune writer.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
find it easy to come up with new melodies for things, So
Yeah.
that's another strand which I quite like. And my
Yeah, I
wife
mean,
is the same. She's an extremely good tune writer.
oh, that's beautiful. I've heard a couple of Wendy's pieces too, and they're lovely.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm eager to listen to more of the gospel. I know you sent me the I Know That My Redeemer Lives, which is just an
yeah,
absolutely powerful piece. And hymns are dear to my heart as well, so that was
yeah.
neat to hear
So I
that
mean,
from you.
it's an interesting thread because my father was a minister,
Okay.
that's a whole kind of another thread in my rather sort of odd CV, if you like.
Yeah, so eclectic, but what wonderful ways to just keep nurturing different veins of music, and it must keep it so varied for you as a composer, right? Because
Yeah.
like you say, you can sit down, compose something, and never know where exactly that journey is gonna land.
But the other thing which
Um,
is interesting to me, I'm doing quite a lot of, I'm a publisher as well, so I've been doing quite a lot of
right.
editing of music by other people. And in nearly every case, I've altered things and said to them, I don't think this quite works. What about this? And they've come back to me
Yeah.
and said, well, you've kind of done what I wanted to do, but I couldn't quite figure out
Right.
how to do it.
Yeah.
In other words, I like getting inside someone else's music as well and trying to
Yeah.
figure out what's the logical outcome of what they've done. So in a sense, I'm an objective writer. I think I start with material of my own and just treat it
Mm,
objectively, if you like.
right. Yes.
And because I do the same with other people's music as well, in that sense, I like being a mentor to other
Yeah.
composers. Yeah,
Yeah, that's going to be something that our audience will be excited about because I know there's lots of composers that are following my channel, which I just love the way this path is taking me alongside teachers and composers. So a lot of them will really love to hear too that you're also publishing, and I'll link that. That's the 80 days, right?
that's right. 80 Days
Yeah,
is an interesting case
yeah.
because how it came about. Shall I tell you this?
Yes, I'd love to hear it.
It's this. There was a very fine typesetter who typeset a lot of my music, including microjazz, way back. He goes back a long way with me without me realizing at Boozy and Hawks. But he
Yeah,
realized there was quite a lot of music which I'd written, which Boozy and Hawks didn't publish because they don't
right.
publish everything. And he said, I wouldn't mind starting a company where we publish other things of yours.
Yeah,
We don't mind if we don't sell vast numbers of them, but I know
yeah.
there's a market there. And so we started publishing pieces of mine, and I ended up, in fact, publishing quite a few pieces of mine which were written before I was with Boozy and Hawks. So I've got a number of
Oh,
pieces out,
neat.
including Brighton Bluesy, which you may have come across, which was written when I
Yes,
was
yes, I
23
have.
years old.
Oh,
So that's
neat.
way before I came in contact with Boozy and Hawks. In fact, it's before I
Yeah,
left New Zealand. And
yeah.
so we've published those, but I gradually have started to publish bits and pieces by other people as well. And we've also made a speciality of music for harp. as
Oh,
a,
wow.
so we've got a lot
Yeah.
of harp publications out. But we're in discussion with various people in Canada as well about offering in distribution and marketing of some kind. So that's quite a nice new
Yeah.
direction. I've always done that a bit, but
Yeah.
this is something which I can do from home.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And you can just enjoy
and
that.
if you look at the 80 Days site, which you probably have, you
Yes, I
see
have.
it says piano, piano duet, piano six hands, vocal, and it's got a lot of my stuff, including all of Connections, because I ended up owning Connections through a chance of
Okay. Yeah.
history. The Royal
Yeah.
Conservatory offered me the chance to buy the entire series in
Oh,
2018,
beautiful.
and I did, and that's become the kind of the main plank of the 80 Days catalogue.
Oh,
Um,
good.
but you also notice that as soon as you open the site, you'll discover there's a book by Jennifer Bowman, there's a book by Wendy Edwards, Norton, my wife, and so
Yes.
on. And there's various other things coming down the line from other people or other product lines. So
Yeah. Oh, that's very exciting. And I'll link that all in the video description so people can browse that. And did I spy some cello works there too?
yeah, no, definitely. In fact, the Royal Conservatory is the big examination board here, but the big one in Britain is the Associative Board, which you may know.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And we do quite a lot of liaising with them, and they asked us if we had any pieces for violin and piano, viola piano, cello and piano, double bass and piano. And because of the present tide of history, they said ideally by women composers. And so
Mm,
I arranged pieces by Jennifer Bowman and by Wendy for
yeah.
violin, piano, viola, piano, cello and piano, and double bass and piano. And we've
Yeah.
already had comeback on the viola book saying we're going to use a number of the pieces from both these books.
Oh,
So,
good.
but I like doing that as well. Where, in fact, we're doing a concert in Stratford in November,
Yeah.
and we're using a very good flute player who's one of Wendy's nephews, as it happens.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic.
And I'm arranging a number of her pieces for flute and piano, and I like doing that as well, where you actually construct a piano part, which is like but not quite the same as the original piece.
Yeah.
But trying to be as close as possible to the original piece, so the composer, my wife in this case, doesn't say, "It doesn't sound like me." In other words, my job is to try and make it sound like she would have done it if she'd done it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And those are unique challenges, I imagine, to
Yeah,
just
no, it's
find
good.
preserve their voice.
She's quite a tough taskmaster, is my wife, in a good way. So
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's so fun. So yeah, we'll link up all those places people can find you because those are such fantastic, rich places for people to find great music, which is
yeah,
good. We'll move on to question 6. I was kind of thinking about this question is from a teacher and a colleague of mine and has to do with failure. And from the outside onlooker, you are a complete success with enviable skills at the piano and a well-established professional relationships with publishers in the music world. And a term I hear now in contemporary conversation is the phrase pain point. And so I was thinking about if you had to choose a challenge you faced as a pianist or composer, what would be that pain point and how has that shaped you as an individual?
I think I've strayed slightly into music for television and film, and that's a very difficult field to get right. Right well, but the people who do that have a particular gift, which is almost something. They have to have a gift for orchestration, for instance, and hear things. And obviously, a lot of the time, that's pure sonic as well. And I work with quite a lot of recording engineers, but I'm not really a recording engineer or recording person myself. I mean,
Yeah.
I've worked in studios a lot, but I've never felt I quite had that gift in that area. So when I've strayed into it, I've discovered I had to back away slightly. And concentrate on what I know I can do. I mean,
Yeah.
so that's an example where people can stray into areas and think actually this is asking gifts or training which I don't quite possess. Whereas other people, I mean, I was good friends with somebody in Britain who's trying to break into film music. This is about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And he decided to go to Los Angeles. He was a very good conductor, and he actually conducted some pieces in London for Hans Zimmer, joining Hans Zimmer's outfit. And in fact, he disappeared from view, and for about 3 or 4 years later, I noticed he'd surfaced again doing the music for Enemy of the State, Shrek 1, Shrek 2, and
Oh,
Shrek
wow.
3.
Yeah.
In those, he ended up at the top of Hollywood. But he
Yes.
had the exact right gifts. He was a very good conductor, very good orchestrator, and he kind of understood entirely what was needed to do. And he also went and had training at the right place, if you like. And I thought, well, I'd like to have done that. It would have been a great way of earning a lot of money in music, but it's not quite me, and there's no point in forcing it. I think so. There are certain areas everybody finds which are slightly outside their comfort zone. Some people would find it educational piano was outside their comfort zone. They would not find it easy to get it right. And so I think all the time, horses for courses, whatever the expression is, you just got to sort of gradually figure out what you can really do well and do that, and not spend time being churned up about what you can't do.
Yeah, I love that. And I think sometimes there are opportunities to stretch ourselves, and we all know that lots of things are stretching as musicians and educators and individuals. Yeah, exactly. Some of them, I just had that image of an elastic band getting overstretched, and it just leaves you kind of lifeless.
With students, it might be the equivalent of saying to a student, what you should really do is memorize a batch of Chopin etudes, and you discovered, in fact, it's really way beyond them, and they're never going to be able to do it. And it was so much effort involved to no good effect. So I'm saying you need to look at the student and say, well, I think what you'd really enjoy is the river flows through me.
Yeah, exactly. I remember that with my grade 10 exam, I think, with the RCM, and I memorized 43 pages, and memory was very hard for me. Nothing came natural. It was very analytical.
So thinking, is this worth all this? Is it worth it?
I know. Well, I had two portions of slow movement left and one contemporary piece, and I finally said to my teacher, I looked up the marks of this, and I've decided it's worth it for me not to gain those marks and just play with the music in front of me. And so I did, and it was glorious. It really helped keep me sane, and I was okay with losing those marks on memory. And I've gained skills over the years, and now I go, I probably could do more than I thought then. But still, it's not my zone of strength, and I think
it's an important point. I mean, I've done so many things in so many different areas, and I've strayed into areas that I've realised I'm not that good at, and I've usually found people to be alongside me to help. But I don't like the feeling of suddenly being exposed and thinking I'm not quite right for this, So So I've gradually sort of not quite narrowed my focus, because it's still quite a wide focus, but I've not tried to do everything. And I think that's made a happy life for me as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you just brushed over briefly the fact of sometimes you find people to come alongside you, or people that can do those things that you're not finding are a zone of strength. And it is a happier place, like you mentioned, to exist in spaces that are comfortable and that you're highlighting your strengths. And
you can still come across situations where somebody much younger comes up and they immediately understand what to do. They totally get it, and you think, well, that's great, but if I had that gift, I'd be doing it.
I like that.
So it's an early lesson I learned is that there are more talented people than me, but I figured in the end of the day, there's only one me. You can only say, well, I can do what I can do, and I'll try to be as good as I can doing that.
Yeah, and I think that's going to resonate with our guest today too, because it's something that's interesting. As I speak to lots of composers too, there's a common thread. It's really easy to just feel like there's so much we aren't good at, and then that prevent us from leaning into the things that really are a zone of strength and are something that you have to offer the world.
Well, on a slightly humorous vein, I always often think that you look at someone who's got a particularly opulent house or big car or something, and you say to them, "What do you do? I need to change to that." And they say, "Well, I work in finance." And you say, "Well, that's a shame, because I've got no gift for finance."
Yeah, exactly.
In other words, there are quite easy routes, you might say, to people being rich and successful, but not everybody is capable of taking those opportunities up. Or
I hear you.
Not everybody wants to take them up either. I mean, unfortunately, I'm also not driven by money particularly. I mean, I just hope that I can make a living doing what I'm doing, but I'm not doing it for the money. I might say.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm doing it because I can do it, and there's a certain market for what I do.
I love that too. Now, you touched on just for a moment that that Wendy is also a composer, and I had loved hearing that she's also was it that she's also a Spotify artist too?
She is, yeah.
Wendy? Yeah. And it sounds like, do you work on projects independently, or are there ways that your creativity collides in a shared home?
We work together quite a bit because, in fact, she writes things down in her own way, not in conventional notation, and I record them and then transcribe them for her. But she's very specific when it gets to me actually writing it down for her. She says, "No, that's not right." And she knows she knows what chords she wants, and she's also got a very specific melodic gift. So I'm not quite an amanuensis, but I'm able to kind of bring onto paper and set on some alias and all that sort of things which she's done, which she wouldn't have been able to do before, I don't think. So I've been able to showcase her to the world in a way that otherwise perhaps would never have come to the surface. And for instance, she's writing a commissioned piece for flute and piano at the moment, which is lovely. And
beautiful.
Again, I'm recording her playing the complete flute melody, and I'm writing it down for her, then printing that out, and then she fiddles about with the chords, and I get as many of the things she wants as possible, and then say, "Is this what you mean?" So I love that process, and again, she's very grateful. The fact that there's nothing competitive about it. I'm not trying to
overtake it.
I'm not trying to overtake her. I'm not suppressing what she's doing because I want to elevate what I'm doing. So there's nothing like that. I think we're just two individual composers, and I love the fact that I'm able to help bring out her individuality as a writer.
Yeah. Oh, that's a special gift too. And I love that that's a beautiful common ground in a new season for you as well with Wendy.
And again, I really enjoy working on other people's music because I feel like I'm the servant of it, if you like.
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything different with her than I do with other people, where I'm just saying, is this perhaps what you meant? If I'm tweaking something very slightly, and I don't necessarily assume that she'll say, "Yes, it is." She might say, "No, that's what you meant."
Yeah, and I love that she sounds like she's got some spunk in there to keep you accountable.
No, she's a feisty individual, which is great. She's Canadian after all.
That's right. Yes, a fellow Canadian. I love it. That's so fun. And I thought of another question here. You have such a vast library of music in your fingers, and this kind of goes with the fact that you're enjoying working on other people's music as a composer. But do you find that your own time at the piano is spent recording or creating, or do you still have the opportunity to play music from others?
I have. In fact, because I'm publishing other people, I've been playing through quite a lot of other things. So I've got a lovely composer whose name you may have come across, who we're about to publish, called Danielle Fournier.
Oh, I haven't seen her yet.
She's French-Canadian composer. She's
beautiful.
From Montreal. And I think she's excellent, and we're taking over her entire catalogue. But I've really enjoyed just playing her music, At the moment, it's only published by a French-Canadian small publishing house, so we're trying to find a way of showcasing it further. But that's an interesting case where I played the stuff through. I think she's like a professor-level music-wise, but I can't really fault it. You know what I mean? All the phrasing, articulation, pedaling, and everything is all there.
Yeah, beautiful.
So she's a case of a fully rounded composer who's not really had a big platform. So that's a great thrill as well, if you like, to bring someone to the public's attention who I think is very, very good already and is a fully formed composer, but just has been working on in a very small area, if you like.
Yeah, and it gives a unique chance to have their voice more heard, right? Which is something that we know is tricky for artists, for sure. So just as we wrap up, I know you've had a long-term collaboration with Boozy and Hawks, who we mentioned earlier. You've worked with them for, I think, 43 years, perhaps.
Well, I've certainly
something
coming up to
like that.
40 years since I first walked through their door, but I've
Oh
been on
my goodness.
contract with them for at least 35 years, I think.
Oh my goodness,
Um,
that's a
and
long time.
and yeah, I'm the only person left practically of those from 35 years ago.
Yeah,
The whole
yeah.
company has changed
Oh,
inevitably, and in fact, it's been bought twice or even three times since, and is now owned by a big American company called Concord Music,
okay.
uh,
I've heard of Concord.
who publish things like the Four Tops. They own a huge pop music catalog as well. But yes, it's been interesting that I've still got that relationship with them, and I have a very good editor there who I know very well. And of course, they're a big name, And
Yeah.
one thing I should tell you is that Micro Jazz, which is probably heading for 3 million sales now, I mean, it's a huge
Mm-hmm.
selling series across
It
many
is.
years, was called Micro Jazz, not by me, but by the person who first played it to at the company, their sort of production person there,
Oh, neat.
who discovered me, if you like.
Yeah.
He called it Micro Jazz because they published Microcosmos,
Oh, okay.
and so they just wanted something which was kind of a more popular style but could be allied to Microcosmos in people's minds as an educational and graded series. So
Yes.
that's the reason for the name. I didn't think of the name. And in fact,
Yeah.
it's never been entirely the right name because it's not really a jazz series. I would say it's more micro soul or micro R&B or
Yeah,
micro
yeah.
rock.
Yeah.
But it had a nice ring to it. And so
Yeah.
I've become known in people's minds a little bit as a jazz composer. But in fact, I'm not really a jazz player.
Right.
I like
Yeah.
jazz and I fiddle about with it. And I can sort of fake it. But again, real jazz players come from a different dimension.
Yeah, it's true.
When you hear Oscar Peterson or when you hear Brad Milder or whatever, or
Yeah.
Chick Corea, you think, I don't know where they're getting that from. It's amazing.
Oh,
But,
yeah. That's funny you say that. I told a friend of mine that plays jazz, I said, when I hear him play, I look at my keyboard and think, I don't know if those notes exist on mine.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah, no,
it is.
there's a mysterious process, and people who are very gifted at it usually are gifted at it from a very young age. In other words,
Yes.
they just know what to do, and
Yeah.
the whole thing is accelerated. And Herbie Hancock's a good example. I mean, he was playing
Yeah.
Mozart concertos when he was 12 with the Pittsburgh Symphony.
Wow.
So he was a prodigy, but he also
Yeah.
played jazz at the age of 12. And he joined Miles Davis's band. I think he was 17.
Oh, wow.
So,
Yeah.
so again, that's what you're up against. It's just quite funny that I've written a very popular series called Micro Jazz when in fact I'm not really a jazz
Player.
But I know the sound of jazz and I can find those sounds when I'm trying to write compositions. But it's
Yeah.
not my natural medium, if you like, to illustrate. I like it, but I prefer listening to other people do it. I just keep coming back to this saying, I am who I am. It's like I'm Popeye. I can do what I can do, and I don't pretend I'm an expert in this field or that field, but I've ended up being able to refine what I can do to such an extent, if you like, that I've got both my own big body of work and also can be a helpful person, I think, to other people who are writing as well.
I love that there's a theme here today is just like staying in places of strength and enjoyment, things that nurture you as an individual and as a composer. And so that's really special to hear that. And I know one last question was from actually a fellow composer and curious about how you would suggest others find publishers, or like what's the process of finding that larger voice for your work? Is there any suggestions you've had for a composer starting out in finding that?
I think try and write good music.
Yeah.
And then
I love
try and notate it very accurately. It's interesting to say, but that's a factor. Try and record it. Try and make YouTube videos so that you're in the modern world. You can start to create a little platform for yourself straight away. It's easy to get on Spotify, even as an artist. It's not that complicated. So if I was starting out, I'd be starting out like that, I think. And in fact, in a sense, I quite like doing the 80 days thing where I'm having to start the whole thing again. And I still come across people every day, where I give a presentation and play a Latin prelude, say, and somebody says, I've never heard of this book. It's been out for 25 years.
Yeah.
So there's always people who've never heard of you. So in a sense,
Yeah.
I'm still in the same position as everybody else, except a lot of people have heard of me. But
Yeah.
so there's that. Try and do good material and try and notate it very accurately. Try and do a certain amount of self-promotion, because I know in the hard world of pop, or I was thinking particularly of country music here, I suppose. Somebody was saying that somebody wanted to come to America and be taken on by an agency, and they said, we won't take you on unless you get like 1,000 people at the gig every night. That's the
Wow.
level you have to be at before we'll even take you on. So what they're saying is you need to get a lot of noise going about yourself before we're interested. That's another factor as well. I think that you need to find some way of making some noise about yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Finding that way of getting
Because if you
some
do,
inertia.
of course, there's an element in which you can make quite a bit of revenue just from self-publishing.
Yeah.
So because going through a publisher is an interesting case, because in fact I get 10% of each copy sold.
Oh, wow.
The publisher
Yeah.
gets 90.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's a lot. You have to sell a lot of copies to make much money.
Yes.
Whereas if you self-publish, you're getting minus postage and the cost of printing. If you're selling for $25, you're probably making 15. I'm making $2.50. So there's pluses and minuses. You have to have a big seller in a way for it would be worth being with a publisher, almost, unless you do things which are taken up by lots of examination boards, which is another good route. But then even then, they pay a certain amount for the use of the piece across 7 years, and then you don't get any more from them for 7 years. So
yes.
It seems good for a moment, but it's not like a regular income.
Exactly.
And the other thing which is worth saying is that Microjazz was actually commissioned by another publisher, not by Booz & Hawkes.
Oh, wow.
And the person who commissioned the pieces said to me, I'd like you to write a set of graded pieces and popular styles. I wrote them, and then he left the company. In fact, he emigrated to Canada. He was in his late 60s.
Oh, wow.
And his wife to be with their daughter, I think. And he wasn't there, and nobody else knew what to do with these pieces, and they sat on my bottom drawer for 2 years. And then I went to Booz & Hawkes, and the person who heard them, who I'm still friends with, is now in his late 80s, said to me,
my goodness.
he totally got them. In other words, I played the pieces, and he immediately understood what they meant, if you like.
Yes.
And I've told this story elsewhere, I'm sure, but it's just so telling, is that about 2 years after they came out, all my books, the new books, were sitting on a stand at the music fair in London, and somebody from the first company, the one who kind of passed on them, came up and said to my friend, whose name was Rex, he said, how are these going? Because he knew they'd kind of passed on them. And Rex said, very well. And the other guy said, why do you think that is? And Rex said, good marketing. And the other guy pulled himself up to his full 6'2" and said, well, it must be, because it certainly isn't the music.
Oh,
and
oh
Rex
goodness.
came and told me that story. And he said, that's why you're with us and not with them, because they're like the Beatles being turned down by everybody except BMI. You've got to find someone who gets what you've done. So don't just go to any publisher. You need to find a publisher who actually thinks this is good. Unsolicited manuscripts for people like Booz & Hawkes, they just don't get looked at.
Pass over.
I mean, it's almost impossible to get stuff even looked at by big publishers. So you've got it in the modern world. You're quite lucky, because I think there are so many, cheap and free mediums to start. And you've probably interviewed composers, haven't you, who are doing that very thing?
Yes.
They're advertising themselves through social media and through YouTube and so on. And if they have enough success, a publisher might take them up, only for them to discover, and I hear stories about this, that they get with a big publisher and then discover that they're making a lot less money because they're part of a big catalogue, and they're not really marketed specifically like they would for themselves. And also the royalties are so small. By the time you lose 65% to a distributor and the cost of printing, you can discover you're making a very small amount of money per book.
And then, like you said, then it's down to volume, which some people might thrive in that, and some people might not.
Volume is very hard to achieve in any sphere. There's no doubt. In the modern world, there's no doubt about it. I don't sell big volumes of things. In 80 days, what we aim to do is sell small numbers of lots of titles. We don't aim to sell big numbers of one title. I mean, we're happy if we do. But we're presuming that my clarinet sonata might sell 2 copies in Belgium and 1 copy in Brazil this month. Connections 10 might sell 8 copies in the United States. You know what I'm saying? It's all small numbers, but you could end up discovering you're selling 200 or 300 books a month across a
Mm-hmm.
big catalogue, and that's
Yes.
another way of doing it. And the other thing we do is we have it all printed digitally, so the
Yes.
people order the book and it's published. It's printed in their country and shipped in their country.
Yes, that print on
So
demand.
it's print on demand, and basically
Yeah.
we do also have distribution, particularly through Hal Leonard, and they do well. One thing is very good, because obviously you only print when somebody orders it. I'm not sitting there with a whole garage full of books, you know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because that's such a risk too when you've got printed materials, and if there's anything editorial that needs to be changed. I mean, just
Exactly.
having that fact that it's print on demand is a huge benefit now
And of
that
course,
you wouldn't have seen years ago.
Exactly. And my business partner is a typesetter, so he's very familiar with the idea. I've actually said to him, because you've noticed, have you, that Connections 9 and 10 have recently been done on video by a very fine pianist called Roger Lord.
I was so intrigued by that.
And he's a French-Canadian concert pianist who plays all over the world, particularly like done 32 tours of China. I mean, he's just come back from Turkey doing a whole lot of concerts.
Fantastic.
And he's finding Connections 9 and 10 that work brilliantly as concert pieces. But he said to me, there's quite a few things in 9 and 10 which aren't quite right, or there are some moments in them which are so hard for one bar.
Oh, interesting.
Students won't play them. So he said, could you consider changing this bar? Or he said, or is a wrong note here? And sure enough, it is. So I've said to my colleague, we're going to put a new edition out of Connections 9 and 10, correcting all these little things. And he said to me, no problem. We just basically send new print files to the print-on-demand publisher.
So wonderful.
So unlike having 2,000 copies in a warehouse, where you say you have to sell all these with the mistakes in them. I've got Boozy and the Hawks publications from the 80s, which have still got glaring mistakes in them, but until they run out of them, I'm not going to have them corrected. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think the modern world is good for young composers. It's a funny thing to say. I'm part of the old world, if you like, but I'm also finding that the new world can work quite well, and I'm enjoying being part of that new world in this new venture.
Yeah, with 80 days. Yeah, well, it's very inspirational. And I just think, even like, I'm not young, but younger generation. And I think all this tech and all this new opportunity can get quite overwhelming. So I'm just always inspired by individuals like yourself that are just leading the way with trying new types of technology, getting a YouTube channel going, and getting all this editing. And yet...
Bear in mind, though, one thing which is worth saying as well that I'm in partnership with someone who's a typesetter and is very good within design. In other words, he's a kind of graphic designer as well.
Fantastic.
And the other thing is, Wendy's son, her youngest son, is a professional videographer.
Oh,
so
fantastic.
All my videos are done by someone who's actually a pro. He comes into my house with 4 cameras and we record 200 videos across a week.
Oh, wow. I love that you say that.
And then what I'm saying is, all of this couldn't be done without me using people who could do stuff I can't do.
Yeah.
I'm doing it again. In other words, I'm always partnering with people who are expert in spheres which I don't. I'm not a videographer. I don't want to record all my videos on an iPhone. So I think I'm already above the pack, aren't I, in terms of the technical quality of the videos. And if there's anything I don't like, if there's anything I think, well, that doesn't really work, or I lose 20 pounds and decide I'd like to record and looking sleeker, we can do that.
Exactly.
In other words, I can comb through them and actually say, can we just replace this one with an updated version? So I'm doing the same thing on video as I'm doing on audio or on and books. And in other words, what I love about the modern world is nothing set in stone.
Yeah, there's more flexibility, isn't there, to just being able to make things change on the fly and being able to edit.
You do need the right people alongside you. I don't get this for free. I pay them a monthly amount to do all this video work. So I've actually got them on staff effectively. But I figured it's worth it.
I think so. And I love that you've again reminded people that yes, lots of this happens in solo mode, but I think we do need to be reaching out to people who can support that journey and invest in people that can do things well and surround us with that opportunity. And it does show. I was actually watching your video and like, how is he getting all those angles? I was envisioning Wendy there trying to follow you around with the
No,
camera. I was like, this is
she's
impossible.
good at photography, but it requires somebody with that setup, and also he's a musician as well, so
Yes.
he edits musically.
Well, thank you so much, Christopher, for this wonderful conversation about life and music. And your willingness to chat was a great encouragement to me. And I hope it will be inspiring to our listeners as well. I know it will. And I'll just make a note to our listeners today. You can find all sorts of helpful video links in the video description to make sure you can connect with the great things that Christopher Norton is doing in the world of music. And I'm just so grateful that our audience is also here. And I can't wait to continue to introduce you to wonderful composers doing great things in the world of music.
And well done to you, Amy, for taking on this amazing initiative. I think it's a marvelous thing.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's just kind of sprung out of nowhere for me, but I'm really enjoying it, and it's a fun project to do. I also have young children, so it's been a fun adventure in amongst the chaos of little children.
But
And
again, I think it's something which you seem to be good at. You know what I mean?
yeah,
In other
thank
words,
you.
it has a sort of naturalness to it, the way you're doing it, which I think implies you're pushing an open door, which is what I'm talking about all the time. That when you're trying to do things, you should go through doors which you're about to open anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. And it's not something that's often spoken. So I think it's years of wisdom there, Christopher, because often people in our culture are just like, well, you just hustle it and you make it happen.
No.
And there isn't that sense of ease of like, actually, just like you're saying, just nudge that door. If it starts opening, there's probably a reason for that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
you're finding something which is in the center of what you can do, and
Yeah.
I think that's the case with you as well.